Hey everyone, welcome back to the Beat Your Genes podcast. This is episode number 327, and in this one, we have a question from a listener about whether psychology is doomed to be a pseudoscience based on this listener's experience as a psychology student. Let's hear what Dr. Lisle and Dr. Howk have to say about this as they discuss their experience in academia. Our first question is the following. Dear doctors, is psychology doomed to remain a pseudoscience based on the crowd of people who self-select to go into psychology? I'm a university student, and from what I can tell, the vast majority of my peers and lecturers really have no interest in questions like, why are we this way? How did we get here? Could it have happened any other way? Instead, they are mainly just interested in having self-serving theories that make themselves feel comfortable. With one of my lectures, I was having a conversation about Norway's adoption study, showing that adopted children had their income and criminality correlated with their biological parents and not their adoptive parents. To which my lecturer said to me, I wouldn't want to live in a world where genes are all that matters. It feels to me that the major obstacle to psychology is that 90% of psychologists who think this way, and that no matter how solid the arguments from the other side will be, they will just keep thinking about what makes them comfortable and then just simply call it a scientific consensus.
Well, it's this sort of interesting commentary and an interesting question. Jen, have at it. I'm sure I'll have plenty to say about this as well, but what's the first things that come to your mind?
And the first thing that comes to my mind is this is not just a problem unique to psychology as a field. I mean, this is just academia in general. I had lecturers and professors who made comments like that to me about all kinds of things. I see that, and I just remember I remember one, we were talking about a certain vulnerable population that was being studied in this particular class. Someone was doing some field work. And I think I asked some kind of methodologically clarifying question about whether they were maybe a little too overinvested in a certain outcome for the group, or that they were helping them in their off time, or there were shenanigans going on. And I just remember them saying, well, why would you want to study someone unless you wanted to help them? You know, it was like this very sort of like, we're not even pretending to have any objective scientific orientation toward this coursework or this research problem. This is very much an ideologically driven, ethically, morally driven, and that's a whole separate conversation, whether that's a useful, if that kind of work has a place in the academy, if it does, what it should look like. But the point is just that people, no matter what their discipline, they're bringing their biases in. They're selecting for, as the questioner is saying, arguments that make them comfortable, arguments that seem to fit with their preconceived notions of the world. And so I don't know that psychology is uniquely doomed any more than anything else is, because this is just the drift of how all of this has been going for quite some time now. And I think it's human nature. I think it's human nature to find yourself in an institution that confers some amount of authority around, I understand this better than everybody else, and to kind of bring in a background of bias and an ideologically motivated orientation toward the problem. So yeah, I think take your training for what it's worth, take the good and leave the rest. Don't get too hung up on this, would be sort of my sense of it. It's not going to win you any friends or advocates in the higher ups to be sort of, making a big case about this everywhere that you go, as righteous as you may feel about it, because your main job in grad school is to get through grad school. And once you get through the program and you have the certification or the licenses that you are looking for to practice out there in the real world, then the work tells the story. Your work as a clinician or your work as an academic, whatever it is that you want to do, that should stand on its own. And you are joining a conversation with a lot of people who are coming from a lot of different perspectives, and you are standing on the shoulders of giants just as they have before. And there's always going to be little personal fiefdoms and arguments and all kinds of things going on there. But I would say just keep your eye on what you're there to do. And there's going to be some good information mixed in with all of the crap, and just try to navigate your ship by that as best you can. That's kind of my general sense.
Yeah. I guess people apparently, we heard from Nathan that people don't mind if we just talk about one.
Just really unpack one question at great length.
Well, as Jen has a phrase in here down through this that goes even deeper and wider than probably she intended at this moment, but she certainly knows what I'm talking about, which is that it's even deeper and worse than this. So the human nature problem fundamentally is, how do we live together under conflict, under resources? And so it's going to turn out that the way that problem is solved is it's generally solved by ultimately it's solved by force. So that's why the world that you see it is drawn up with little lines in it. It's called the political map. Okay. And that is somebody conquered that territory and they did it by force. That's what happened. And to this day, everybody draws little lines in the sand, and then it's force. And so the force doesn't stop between countries. It's also within countries. So the warrior classes and the priesthood, those things have wedded together throughout history, become the ruling classes, and they basically say, well, we're protecting you from both evil things and evil people, and therefore you have to pay us a bunch of money. And that's how this is going to work out. That's what it is, i.e. governments, taxes. That's what it is. Well, the United States came along 250 years ago and said, yeah, we don't kind of like that idea. We're going to do it a little bit differently. And so they sort of tried to do it differently, but it more or less wound up in the same place. Okay. So in other words, no matter how hard they tried, and they were absolutely ingenious. And I'm sure Jen, who knows vastly more about this than myself or any normal person, will probably tell you that I don't know, on a scale of 1 being idiocy and 100 being brilliance, where would you have put the United States' organized political structure circa 1790?
On a scale of 1 to 100?
Yeah.
Oh, for sheer political brilliance, it's in the high 90s.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an incredibly innovative, amazing system. But I think most people who have thought seriously about this question, which is this is the question of comparative politics, which is, why do different systems that attempt to impose the same rules have different results? It's taken us a long time to come around to this conclusion, but you can't just import the rules of the game from the US into just any context and expect it to work the same way. So designed as a political system, it's incredibly brilliant, but it had the special sauce of the people who were bringing that system into being at that time. The rules themselves are necessary, but not sufficient to hold up against the test of time. And as we have seen, we don't still have people with the convictions that the founding fathers had, particularly around binding themselves and binding their desire for power, and
yes.
to consolidate their power around their tribal interests.
Right.
They were singularly aware of and careful about that, not just at the level of the institutional design, but as individuals, as people. And that went through a decay function generationally.
Right.
And so we find ourselves now where we still have the paper rules that describe an incredibly brilliant republic, but it doesn't work anymore like it once did.
Right.
Yeah.
And the seeds of the modern absurdity in the academy were sown in 1913 with the Federal Reserve Act, amendment to the Constitution. So then you got a income tax. And so the income tax, I went back and looked at the history of this. This is real interesting. I mean, I'm going to get these numbers wrong, but they're close, people. So apparently there was arguments in Congress that when they instituted the amendment to the Constitution, that the income tax, federal income tax, should be it was going to be a graduated thing. In other words, poor people don't pay anything, and then rich people pay a lot. But the rich people were supposed to only pay somebody said we cannot go past 10%. 10% has to be the top. Okay. So, and then other counter arguments in Congress were, oh, don't even think that we're going to get anywhere near 10%. Founding fathers would have never put up with such crap. We'll get a revolution if we ever went past 10%. So don't worry about it. So the top end that they started with was, I think, 6% for Andrew Carnegie. Okay. So Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller, and whoever else was just, the robber barons at the time. All right. So that's fine. Except that by 1917, the top rate was like 75%. They just instantaneously blew through all concept. In other words, they're just going to go after the wealthy people and they're going to grab all their money. That's what happened. Okay. And in a fabulous book written by Arthur Laffer just a few years ago called Taxes Have Consequences, he very clearly showed something that I never learned, even though I've studied quite a bit about economics, that the taxes are responsible for all of the crashes that you have seen in the United States economy. So Milton Friedman would say it's about monetarist policy, and Arthur Laffer clearly demonstrates, no, it's taxes all the way. And so, and he explains very clearly how it is that this works, and he has marvelous data to support it. And it's extremely logical. But the bottom line is that this is the warrior class who is holding the reins over the people, pointing guns to their heads, and saying, you don't really understand what happened with that constitutional amendment, do you? Because now, don't worry about it. They're only just going to tax the rich. Oh, really? Now it's everybody. Okay. Now half the people are ponying up a substantial amount of their money to federal income taxes. The United States, we roll our eyes at this like it's no big, like it's not that big of a deal, but it is a big deal. What you've gotten is a massive growth of the federal government, and with that, they have taken over the academy. So you can call Harvard or Yale private institutions, but they are not private institutions. They are massively supported by public funding. Every little bit of research, every professor there has a National Science Foundation grant or National Institute of Health grant. In other words, they can't have grad students unless they have grants. So now it turns out, this is all being run by governmental processes. Okay. So now you have people able to position and essentially have commentary and shape now the what is being studied at the academy and what is legitimate to be studied at the academy and what is legitimate to be even saying and what will be published in journals that are supported by taxpayer money. Ultimately, what that is going to be is it's going to be whatever it is that the people who are in political power think is okay. Okay. So no longer does anything that is published or being read having to be bought and paid for by consumers who are attempting to learn something valuable for their lives. Oh no, we have no such tethering to what it is that we do in the academy. Now we are going to study and publish with taxpayer money, and we're going to stick it in all the libraries all over the world. This is going to be what we say is true. We don't give a rat's ass what the truth is. Okay, that's not involved with the National Science Foundation. That's not what they care about. They care about whether or not you are promoting what it is that the people in power actually believe ought to be said. Okay, and so you have massive censorship that people don't even appreciate how it is that this goes down. There's a damn good reason that Jen and I are not academicians. Like anybody that's watching this show and knows anything about us, if there was any two people that were academicians in their soul, it's Jen and I. We are clearly academicians.
I always assumed that would be how it would go. It seems like the reasonable place to be, but yeah.
There's Brett and Heather Weinstein. I mean, how the hell can you look at those people and not see two academicians? You're looking even more at the academy.
They're even more comfortable. They're even more comfortable in an academic setting, I think, even though that they also had to be, against their will, wrenched free of it. I do want to just kind of jump in here briefly to, I think sometimes when we talk about this, people are not understanding the subtlety of the censorship and the coercion apparatus. It's not as if someone's putting an arm around you and taking you to some shadowy back room and saying you need to write about this and not that, or no, we're not going to approve your dissertation prospectus unless you say this, this, and that. It's not that explicit. It's a culture. It is and the culture is built around repeat exposure and the fact that you build a career in academia through relationships. And so not only do all of the professors have government funded grants to afford their grad students, but the grad students also need to apply for government funded grants. And you're applying for an NSF grant, for example, a National Science Foundation grant, that whatever division you're applying to from the National Science Foundation has a program officer associated with it. That program officer is reviewing your application and you have a personal relationship with them. And so this is the implicit subtext of every interaction with every funding agency is, you sort of read our research guidelines, you play the game, we all know how you want to formulate this research proposal. You want to set out certain goals about what you're looking to find. You're going to set out certain hypotheses about what you expect to find. You're going to speak a very particular language around this, but it is not explicitly communicated ever. But that if you're going to get the grant that time, and then if you're going to apply again next year, that program officer is a lifer. They're a bureaucrat who is in that, whether they're in that exact role or not, they still continue to influence the next person who's in that role and the next program over. And everybody's talking to each other. Everybody sees each other at all of these conferences and everything. So because it's so relationship driven and collaboration driven, and you cannot be a lone wolf in academia, you just can't. You're going to wither and die. You're not going to get the support of your department. You're not going to have graduate students. It's an incredibly powerful form of soft, invisible coercion and censorship. And just because you can't necessarily point to smoking guns and say, I'm not allowed to talk about XYZ in the following way. Everybody knows it. Everybody feels it. If you do a good survey of students, you will see this. Harvard was actually by a mile the most repressive, according to student reports. With I think the Fire Institute did a survey on free speech on campus, and not only was Harvard the least free, it was the least free by at least a standard deviation. I mean, it was very, very suppressive. But you're not going to have receipts for that in the way that I think people have this intuition that well, if there's no receipt, then it didn't happen. It's a culture. It's in the water. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there to clarify for people.
Beautiful, because this is how an undergraduate, anybody that was listening to us and is an undergraduate and asking the question that they ask, you are a fish so far out of water that you can't even understand why you can't ask that question, and why it is that they're going to give you the answer that they're going to give you. The truth is that there are things that are Jen, you probably know this better than I don't even explain to me. I'm pretty sure I know what the third rail actually means in mechanically. Isn't that old electric trains that used to have a thing down the middle of them?
That's
And
a
if you
Nathan
step
question, not a question. He's the engineer. But yes, that's my understanding of it, is that that's the highest voltage area of the entire track.
Yeah, he's our engineer. I don't know. He's too young though. He doesn't know anything about trains like that.
I think you still see it in certain subway
Yeah,
stations
i.e.,
with
don't
big
step on the
flashing
third
warning
rail
lights.
because
Don't.
you're gonna
Yeah.
fry to death. Okay.
Yeah.
And but this is but behavior genetics and evolutionary psychology are effectively off limits. In other words, they go against a blank slate regime, which is absolutely dead center, page 1 of the baby book of communism. And so as a result, the problem is that behavior genetics is going to be basically saying, hey, people are born differently, and therefore what they're able to contribute to society is going to be different, and you can't all make them the same. So if you have unequal outcomes, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with your society. It means that there is a contributory meritocracy that is going to wind up being correlated with all kinds of outcomes, whether they be beauty or whether they be athleticism or whether they be financial. And so, and financial being where the rubber hits the road, where people can do something about it. Okay. So, and believe me, they did something about athletic ones for a long time. It was called the Southeastern Conference in the United States. God, it wasn't too long. Now I got a
It took you
sports
half
fan.
an hour. Yeah, it took it. I mean, it actually was a while this time.
But the point is that there was for a long time that college athletics was organized in places where black athletes and professional athletes, where black athletes couldn't come in because the white folks didn't want to have to compete with them. They didn't want to face that meritocracy. And so that would be one example. But the nature of life is that each individual human is individual. They're individually different than every other human. And so there are objective differences that have very substantial importance. So, who do you want? Do you want a PhD that's also a great table tennis player from MIT, flying your jet? Or do you want somebody that is the second percentile for IQ that can barely talk? Like, obviously, Doug, you don't make it ridiculous. Oh, okay. Well, then we're going to walk down through that difference between that guy and the second percentile guy through all kinds of jobs, all kinds of positions. And we're going to find out that at every step of the way, there are meaningful differences between those people and what they can contribute. Okay. So that means who should be in charge of the DMV in Los Angeles? Answer: the most competent person should be in charge. That's exactly who should be in charge. Nobody else. Why? Otherwise, you're ripping off the taxpayer. And so anyway, the long and short of this is that the academy is fundamentally at its fundamental root, down deep in the academy, it's communist. They are elitist communists, and they have an assault against meritocracy. And the place that they are most assaultive towards the meritocracy is in commerce. That bothers them, and so I think because they all opted out of it. For we could speculate a million different ways about how it is that it got to where it is, but it's rotten at the core. And so and that's where we have. So that if you are somebody that has heard the truth, that has recognized the truth, that is so obvious, all you have to use is your two eyes, and you understand behavior genetics, and you understand the rudiments of evolutionary psychology. It's like you're like, how can the entire academy and all social sciences not be basing all of their thinking, should be looking for consilience inside the theory of evolution? Because the theory of evolution is the theorem that proves, and it has proved, in other words, it is a way for us to have identified the truth about what integrates all, all life. That's what it does. Okay, so that everything that is true must be integrated with the theory of evolution. There cannot be anything in life processes that is not integrated with the theory of evolution. It is impossible. Okay, so this is what we call a perfectly nested logical system. They are not, they're not going to have any part of it because it goes against a bunch of political agendas. And so the academy is deeply corrupted. The person is correct. It will always be, I wouldn't call psychology as pseudoscience. And I mean, because we're going too broadly here. There are people in psychology and in the social sciences that are scientists, and they are doing legitimate scientific work, and they're publishing legitimate scientific work. The only work that you're allowed to do is work that does not step on any of these toes. So if you're a sociologist and you want to talk about, well, how far away from, how wide should the crosswalks be, and where are people being killed in crosswalks because, about the social processes of how many people and how close to, like, whatever. You can do all kinds of research so long as it doesn't get any close to any truth that actually starts integrating massive amounts of observations and having prescriptive concepts about how things ought to run. As long as we don't go anywhere near there, as long as we have tiny little piecemeal BS that adds up to almost nothing, you get your NSF grant renewed. Oh, and by the way, people are like, well, what do you mean grad students and NSF grants? Well, that's the only way a professor survives. Unless you publish, you will be fired. So you will be let go after 5 or 6 years if you have not achieved tenure, and you will be out on the street with a useless degree and a cup and an eye patch. That's it.
Oh no, you'll just go get a job at a little failing private college somewhere. See, you couldn't get tenure at a flagship, but you can go restart the clocks at some place that's just existing on the predatory loan scheme.
Yes,
that's the
right.
ecosystem takes care of its own.
Trump University.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that really sucks about it is that the kind of soft censorship that we're talking about here, it impoverishes actual science and actual discovery. Because what I would love to see happen is really robust critique of behavioral genetics from outside of within its own little world. So right now, the only people that are meaningfully critiquing any work in behavioral genetics are other behavioral geneticists. They're not people with any kind of wider lens who might have methodological issues with the twin studies, which I've brought up before, and I think are they're not insignificant. There's considerable issues there. They're not people who are having other competing hypotheses that might still be consilient with evolution that they want to integrate into a meaningful academic conversation, because it gets strangled in the crib before you could even start to have these discussions. You can't even go there. You're immediately, this is debunked, this is pseudoscience, this is not, you can't even include this stuff in your literature review, it's not relevant. And so you don't have any kind of cross-pollination or interdisciplinary work that would ultimately strengthen the case of the truth wherever it may be found, and including in the behavioral genetics work, which is subject to flaws like anything else. And when you have any kind of discipline where the fox is watching the henhouse, like which has happened across the board everywhere, like this is how peer review is functioning. This is how every discipline that should be somehow having some kind of external validation process occurring, it's just not occurring. And so the people who are kind of holding the reins of their own self-interest to protect their own career interests, to advance their grad students, to continue the whole thing just sailing merrily across the sea, they're not going to allow any kind of cross discussion if it's outside of their cherished paradigm. And this is not just a problem in psychology; it's a problem in political science, it's a problem in sociology, it's a problem in all the social sciences. Increasingly, a problem in the so-called hard sciences as well. And I just see it at this point as irretrievable. Like you can't fix this thing. So either you play the game like you need to play it, or you get out of academia.
It's been corrupted by stolen money.
Yeah,
that's what it is. And so this problem did not exist in 1912. Okay, so this is how this happens. Okay, so these are this is the extraordinary unintended consequences of having a massive federal government. This is exactly the kind of crap that happens. And now you're watching an accelerating process. We have censorship of content now that's much worse than it was 15 years ago. And
so much worse. I mean, that's approximately, certainly when I was an undergrad and even starting grad school, it felt way more open. There were way more possibilities than there are now. The chilling effect just in the past, I would say post 2012 or so, that's when I really started to see things start to slam closed. There's just the idea that there's any kind of meaningful intellectual work being done at any of these institutions apart from very occasional accidental serious intellectual work. It's not happening. People are just consolidating the power they already have and protecting it fiercely.
Yes. So anyway, that's the story.
Yeah, I'm curious, how would you guys comment on the difference between the subjectivity in the social sciences? Because like in engineering school, we didn't have these issues. I mean, it was math, 1 + 1 is 2, and it doesn't matter how you feel about it. It is what it is. We've kind of accepted certain fundamentals in the mathematics. And we would take, every so often you have like a class that's blended with some of the non-engineering students, and they'd bring things up, and we all just kind of look at them, and there was people that were liberal and conservative, and we'd just say, where are you getting this information from? It doesn't make any sense. There's no fundamentals there. But can you both comment on I mean, in math, it's objective. It is what it is, and it's not emotional. But whereas, with the social sciences, there seems to be that element of kind of a more humanistic nature, and more of a subjective experience with this. And so it seems like it lends itself to a lot more subjectivity. And so then you can't really prove something right or wrong, or like you can with mathematics.
Oh, you can.
Mm-hmm. At least you couldn't at the time. That's what I thought.
But you're not going to be published. In other words, so you're not. So the people that are speaking and have the microphones and have the textbooks publishing, this is all corrupted. And so the field is very capable of doing outstanding work. In fact, the most sophisticated work in design of science comes out of the social sciences, because that has to be, because of all of the threats to validity are so much more complicated than when you're studying people and social processes than when you're studying, electricity and matter. Okay, those things are perfectly repeatable. Human nature being so complicated and human dynamics being so complicated, it's always going to be sloppy. So you must use statistical processes, and then you have to be super careful about threats to validity. So the most sophisticated people on Earth when it comes to experimental design are absolutely social scientists, without a doubt. Okay, so
also the worst and sloppiest, and
sure,
least like just the fact that there is excellent work being done with statistical design in the social sciences does not remotely imply that all of it is done well. And this is the nature of the problem, because there's good work, and but it always just regresses to this endless debate about research design, about how you operationalized your variables, how you set this up, what kind of testing did you do, what kind of modeling did you do. And so even within people who are doing fairly good work, at least in political science, which I can speak to more than psychology, that is kind of the essence of a lot of the debates. Is there is never kind of a final word on something, because any group that you bring that to is going to be going after the design and saying, well, you didn't consider this, or you've got this issue, or you've got this hidden variable, or you've got this problem. And a lot of those concerns are valid. And, if it can't be replicated, which is the other big problem that is certainly a crisis in psychology and everywhere else across the social sciences, and almost nothing seems to be successfully replicated, then you've got additional issues on your hands. And so then all of the air in the room is used up in this critique of the design and the setup rather than the results themselves. We're not even going to talk about the results because we need to get this right. And that just launches a million other careers, and people spend decades caught up in the weeds on that. So yeah, it's all very silly.
Yeah. Well, it's I'm disgusted with the social sciences. There's I just had a conversation with an individual that's working for a top flight young academic in neuroscience and psychology, studying addiction. And listening to what this person is thinking, I am flabbergasted about how naive the person is, and what a lack of understanding they have about behavior genetics. So and this is a big shot professor at a major league university, young professor. And literally, as I sit here and I listen to what this guy is thinking, there's one of two hypotheses. Number one, he doesn't know anything about behavior genetics. Okay, so that's hypothesis number one. Hypothesis number two is he knows exactly what the story is on behavior genetics, but he doesn't dare formulate his career that is informed by it. Okay, there's exactly two possibilities. There is no third possibility. Okay, what he is doing is absurdly naive with respect to what is understood about behavior genetics. So he's following down a hypothesis about very early childhood trauma that results in drug addiction. Okay, there's no way in hell that's true. Okay, there's absolutely absurd, and yet that will get funded. There's no doubt about it. And he's got a nice, interesting theory about a cascade process that doesn't, then nothing shows up at all until puberty, and then it somehow reemerges, I guess, past Freud's latency stage. Whatever the hell it is an absolute abomination of anything that has any connection to reality. Okay, but it absolutely fits blank slate, trauma, and therefore, et cetera, modeling. And in no way are we going to get anywhere near behavior genetics. We're not going to inform the study by behavior genetics. This is amazing. And so hearing that this is literally a cutting edge person that is early high success career. In other words, plenty of grant money, fancy position, fancy university, destined for superstardom, early career awards. Really? This is what this guy's doing? It's like, okay, what would I expect? Like, I know that this stuff is going on. I'm like William Proxmire, that used to have the Golden Fleece Award in the United States Senate for looking at the things that wasted the most government money. Like, all you have to do is move your finger around a budget proposal and stick your finger and stop, and there it is. Whatever it is, it's wasting a bunch of government money. This is a classic example of an entire career that will spend millions of dollars of taxpayer money in grants support, and that money basically, when a professor gets a bunch of grant money, you're like, well, where does it go? Well, it goes to the university. That's where it goes. The guy gets $5 million over 5 years to study this BS, when actually all he's going to do is just going to have a couple of grad students do some, modeling on a computer and have a computer science guy and a consultant with a stats guy. It's like there's not going to be that much work.
It's all going to happen in one drunken weekend with a bunch of pizza. Like that, that's seriously, like the grad students gonna be like, fuck, we got to do this. Like, the reporting's due in a week. I guess we got to like come up with some model and all right, let's go to the lab. Like it's the rest of the time, it's just being laundered through the system.
There you go. And the professor's getting $166,000 a year because half of his salary is being paid for by the grant, and et cetera, et cetera. So this is taxpayer money out of a coal miner in Pennsylvania. So that coal miner is making $61,000 a year, but $3,000 of it that he of his tax money is going right to this bullshit. Okay, so that people can do this thing and make sure to do the one thing that we're not going to have happen out of academia. We are not going to discover the truth. That's for damn sure. Okay. We are not a truth-seeking machine. We are a propaganda machine. And that is exactly what the academy has turned into. How else would we have expected it? The whole thing has no meritocratic process that is driving it. And it's like, oh, well, that's supposed to be the good part. We don't have to answer to the marketplace. It's like, yeah, if you don't have to answer to the marketplace, this is what you get. Okay. And so, yeah, and the academicians themselves are not sophisticated in their thinking about any of this. And it doesn't even matter. They are part of the warrior class now. They are being fed at the point of a gun by the taxpayer who has no possibility of pushing back against this. And what we're going to get is trash. So anything that the academy happens to discover is a happy accident. Once in a blue moon, you're going to get a Tubian Cosmides or you're going to get a David Buss. And David Buss will tell you, oh, it's 10 times harder to get one of my studies published than something else.
And that was a while ago. That was a while ago. I mean, yes. I don't know that the incentives being what they are currently, that you're really going to get any independent thinkers. I mean, I was just listening, invoke Brett and Heather again here. It's even worse than that. I was listening to one of their recent episodes, and they were talking about kind of this seems like a non sequitur, but it's related. The fact that we are in now, 2024, and we still have Harvard and I think 60 other leading institutions that are requiring students, not just encouraging, but mandating them to be vaccinated. And so the against COVID. And so the selection process that is happening here of who is still on campus and able to get a degree at these institutions are good soldiers. They're good Germans. They're good. They're following the rules. They're saying they don't have a choice. You're not even allowed in the door at this point unless you're complying with this completely anti-scientific mandate that the university is imposing on its students, not on its faculty, notably in most cases. So these are mandates that are being laid down on students, but of course you couldn't retain all of your faculty if you continued to insist upon it at this point. So
there might be some employment law implications
the
too.
fact that this does not have, massive protests, that you don't have Harvard Yard filled with huge protests happening over that hypocrisy is appalling enough. But you compound this over the next 10 years or so, and the people who are emerging with these degrees, Brett has made these comments about sort of the mandates in the military as well. You wind up with people who are very comfortable following very irrational rules, and so the resonance of that in the work that's being done in the academy is 1-to-1. And so whatever's coming out of these places now, it's even crappier in 5, 10, 15 years. Like it's just, you just kind of have to give up on it.
There won't be a David Buss.
I feel like I need to have a class action suit against Harvard for like sort of eroding the value of my degree.
But the thing is that is your ticket to become part of the priest warrior class.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So
continue
that is effectively, i.e., you're a member of the Communist Party in Russia. You know,
Yeah.
are you in the party or out of the party? And that is that is exactly what this all looks like. It's disgusting as hell.
Yeah,
I mean,
my
I
parents
always
grew up
thought,
in Russia, and they said that they grew up in separate areas in the USSR, and it was exactly like this. If you followed all the rules, you got a little red band. You were like the red soul. You know, you were like a
yeah,
young pioneer, and
Yes.
yeah, it's
yeah.
all a social process, social status you gained by listening to the teachers.
I mean, I
Your
went to
parent,
grad school.
yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Doug.
Your parents were both from Russia?
Yeah, from the Soviet Union. Yeah.
That explains so much, Nathan.
Even in modern day Cuba, it's been years since I've been, but there's still like little committees for the defense of the revolution. You know, you
Yeah.
go into neighborhoods and they'll have little neighborhood meetings, and you have your little badge, and there's like a little local dude who's in charge of his little local committee and making sure that everybody does what they're supposed to do. And this is just the logic of this human nature at work.
Yeah.
But there was this moment in the academy in the United States, this the golden moment. I mean, and I had enough of a sense of that going in, you know, even into the 2000s, certainly in the 90s and into the 2000s, this kind of vision. And this is why I wanted to go to grad school. This is what I thought my life would be. If, you know, you're having spirited debate, you're sitting around with other intelligent people, and, you know, you're having you're really testing your biases, you're really testing your ideological sacred cows. You're being challenged by people that you really disagree with, but you profoundly respect, and that it's this vibrant atmosphere of an exchange of ideas. And that's what it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be, oh, you can only be on my research team and part of my research lab because you've applied for admission to this institution because you already agree with everything that I'm working on, and you want to work with me because you consider me the guru in your particular little area. But that's what it's become. And that happens in David Buss's lab as much as it happens, you know, in whomever's sociology lab that's doing total BS work. And it's just they become these sworn enemies against each other. They don't exchange ideas in a meaningful way, and everything just withers and dies as a result. There's just nothing creative, there's nothing generative, there's nothing useful that's coming out of the academy anymore, and hasn't been for a really long time. It's just a very sorry, very tragic state of affairs. So the only way that you can get that work is to be independent.
Yeah, I had a conversation with my dad just before he died, and one of my professors in grad school had written this book that they were theoretically proud of. It's because it was printed by Harvard University Press. That's why they were proud of it. That, you know, that means you accomplished something. And I actually, out of a certain amount of respect, I went ahead and read it. It was utterly mediocre. In other words, it was exactly the same pablum and useless stuff that I had, that 25 years earlier I had witnessed firsthand. Okay. In other words, I knew exactly what that person thought. They hadn't changed their mind about anything, and the things they're bragging about 25 years later were things that had been done 25 years earlier. Mm-hmm. And I said to my dad, I said, so and so. I said, yeah, I actually had contact with this individual, and I said, they have accomplished nothing.
Yeah.
I said, they have accomplished absolutely nothing in the last 25 years. I said, I'm so glad that I didn't go into academia.
Wasted life.
I said, this is an amazing thing to see that. I said, yeah, the person's a full professor, made a really good living, et cetera, et cetera. And my dad almost dead said, and my comment was, the guy didn't have any talent anyway. You know what I mean? This was a completely, you know, reasonably hardworking, completely overpaid, utterly useless human being who accomplished absolutely nothing. Okay. And my dad said it was the right thing to do. In other words, my dad recognized if you don't have any talent and you don't have any guts and you have no probable ability of being very useful to the world, just play it careful. Don't do anything and just knock down your big salary and have plenty of prestige. And it was, I mean, my dad really wasn't particularly cynical, but he was looking at it through the lens of the 123 IQ academic and realizing, well, what else would you do?
Right.
You've got kids to feed and a mortgage to pay. You're not going to go out there and put a knife between your teeth and try to make a living somewhere. No, why would you? So that is a hell of a lot of what academia is. And it's a bunch of scared people. I can remember those people. They were doing their little prestigious little tiny little skirmishes. That's what counted for, it's like a couple of people, having a little bit of testy words with each other, thinking that they've just been in a UFC fight. It's like, really, go door to door and try to sell a Hoover vacuum cleaner. Then you'll find out what real life is like. But no, it's a sequestered place, and you play the game extremely carefully. You flatter people. You don't say anything controversial. The most controversial thing is that, gee, I think purple socks, are nicer than blue socks. You know what I mean? I don't know. I think we are really have a debate about that. That's where the debates are. The debates are not whether or not the entire concept of early childhood trauma causing drug addiction is completely absurd, has absolutely no support for it. What the hell are you doing, wasting all of our time and money doing this? And the answer is, I'm getting my check.
And not just drug addiction.
Getting my check. I'm going to make sure I get a nice check with a nice office. Everything is going to be secure because I'm not doing a damn thing in this world that's useful for any other human being. We're all going to pretend that I'm doing something useful, honorable, altruistic, and highbrow. That's what it's going to sound like. Okay. And that's academia. And it's disgusting. But you know what? Yeah, it's very much the feeling that one might have about Nazi Germany, and that is, quote, the good Germans. It's like, really, you didn't know, really, and you find yourself with two different perspectives. It's rotten to the core, and where was the courage on the inside? And it's like, well, that's what Milgram is for, and that's what the perspective is for us to understand that. The people aren't rotten to the core. The system's rotten, and but these people are more willing to be rotten than the good Germans were willing to be rotten. The good Germans didn't have as much choice as these people have.
And it's even worse than that.
They're also it doesn't seem like there's a lot of violence going on like there was in Nazi Germany. So from that perspective, it's
very true.
Yeah.
But it's like, you're not. The thing that people are unwilling to do in academia is not even to turn that dial to 11 and commit violence against the other person. It's just to ask questions. It's just to say, hey, it seems like we're in some lockstep here. Have you guys considered this? Like, people are not even going to put themselves out on a limb the tiniest little bit. And that has become more and more the case as the years go by. The tolerance that an individual grad student or untenured faculty member or even tenured faculty member has to rock the boat at all. It's not. I'm not asking you to go out there and say all of your blank slate thinking is BS, and here is how it is, and I'm going to plant my flag here, and I'm going to make myself a total pariah in the department. You don't even have to do that for me to have intellectual respect for you. You just have to. You just have to say.
You have to hey, listen to 327 episodes of Beat Your Jeans, and then you'll be fine.
I just want a revival of intellectual curiosity and intellectual honesty, and it's as desperately as I want to see that revival, it's not going to happen at the university, and it's really I just, it's a source of immense sadness for me, because
Yeah.
that's what I want to spend my life doing, is having those conversations and engaging in that kind of work. And I can't find a place to do that because the university is not a place for me anymore. And we haven't built up parallel institutions that meet that need. And I'm not sure that we're going to be able to.
You can't. You're competing against massive taxpayer-funded money. You're competing against a literally a place awash in stolen loot. There's no way to
So
compete.
I
I'm
think
just
it was
gonna be
Thomas
that-
Sowell who said that it's hard to make someone understand something if their paycheck depends on them not understanding it.
Yeah.
There you go. Well said by one of the great minds of the 20th century. Yep.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the like and subscribe buttons, as it helps out our channel a ton. If you'd like to hear any past episodes of the show, you can listen to them on any major podcasting platform or visit www.beatyourgenes.org. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.